looking deep down the left side. Mendeville into the end zone. Touchdown!
Down the sideline, still Foley. Foley pointing to the house.
And the players streaming from the sideline to celebrate with 17 seconds left.
Welcome, everybody, back to BVarsity Live. I'm your host, Trevor Horn. We are in the downtown TBC studios, and we are brought to you by Grapevine MSP and Motor City Buick GMC. Thank you once again for joining us. It is week 6 of the high school football season. I am joined by, as always, Josh Bennett, who is not just here for our preview prediction segment. He's going to stay in here the whole show. We've got a special guest on the show today. We have CalHi sports editor Mark Tennis, who I think we first met, about 2012 when I was still a preps reporter up in the Sacramento area. We bring Mark in for a very specific reason. We will not do any highlights this week. We won't do a team of the week. We want to be able to give Mark his due diligence for the next half hour because Mark did this. He wrote this book, High School Football in California. And if you are anywhere near a fan of high school football in this state, like I am, you were going to pick this book up and you're going to breeze through it as quickly as possible because I loved it. I finished it in about a day and a half. One morning, I think I woke up at 6 a.m., couldn't sleep, and I just barreled through this thing for about an hour and a half. I love it. Mark, thank you, and welcome to Bakersfield. Thanks for making the trip down from Stockton.
Thanks. I just pulled into town. I wish
pulled into town.
I wish I had gotten a little bit more time, but to visit before we went on air. But I'm glad to be here. I'm looking forward to seeing the Drillers tomorrow night against Sierra Canyon.
Yeah.
That should be a really good game.
Yep.
Sierra Canyon has a couple losses, but don't let that deceive you. It's a very good team. It should be a great game.
Have you seen Sierra Canyon play yet this year? Because
not this year.
From everything that Paul Gola says is they run a no-huddle offense that makes Chip Kelly blush how fast it is.
Yeah, I don't know. They didn't do that when they won state a couple years ago. They won their division in state, and they had a very good team. I think they were undefeated at the time, but I'd have to look it up. But they have some good players. Good. They have a couple close losses. One was to Lawndale, which has a running back going to USC.
Yeah.
Jordan Wilmore is a great player, and they also lost a close game to Westlake, which is we have 16th in the state. And that was 25-22. I think that was a real close game. So it's a quality team. It's a quality opponent.
Mark, you're not only on this here just to be here on this show. Obviously, there's another reason you're in town.
Sure.
I want to let viewers know you are going to be at the Barnes & Noble on California at 2 p.m. on Saturday.
Yes.
With a signing ceremony for your book. You want to tell us a little bit more about that and how your those signing ceremonies have gone for you so far?
Yeah, this will only be the second one we've done. The first one was last weekend in Stockton, kind of more local. A lot of people, a lot of longtime fans were there. This one is more of a road trip, but it's going to be at the Barnes & Noble from 2 o'clock to roughly 4 or 4:30. People want to bring a book they've already bought. Hopefully they can buy one there. It's a great way to talk high school football. Any longtime fans are welcome. It's fun. I mean, I get as much out of visiting with people that have been around for 20, 30, 40 years, talking about when they were in high school and the teams they were on. I get as much out of that as visiting with other people as they might get out from visiting with me. So I welcome everyone to come down to Barnes & Noble about 2 o'clock, but I'll be there for a couple hours for sure and sign books for people. Yeah.
If anybody's watching the show and you don't know who Mark Tennis is, I'm going to ask you one question. Why? Do you subscribe to CalHi Sports? Why not? It's the best. How much you guys offering it for now?
$3.99 for a month, but people can get it for $24.99 for a year, which is about 6 cents a day.
Yeah.
If you got the whole year.
Yeah, I mean that's incredible when you look at the state historical references in terms of statistical leaders,
right?
In terms of just basketball, football, baseball, softball, coaching records, the state rankings you do, what Ronnie Flores does for high school basketball on your website is incredible.
Right.
You've got Old Harold.
Yes. Crackback block, Harold.
Let's go back to the beginning. It was 1979 when you and your Uncle Nelson started this thing. Did you guys create this back in Carmichael, or were you weren't in Stockton?
I was in college at San Jose State.
Okay.
I was in college, and I was studying journalism. And Nelson it was his hobby, was collecting high school sports records for California, and he would go to libraries and he'd send me on library excursions to look up stuff at the state library. And I remember looking up stuff when I was in high school, looking up stuff on microfilm. That's how you research a lot of this stuff.
We got one right over here.
It's very grinding work. But at the state library, they have a newspaper from every county in California. So they have the Californian there. They have the Fresno Bee. They have the LA Times. They have them all the way back. You can look up anything. And in the days with Google now, it seems like it's easy, but there's still a lot of stuff you can't look up that way. You have to go to the microfilm room and look it up on a newspaper reel from 50, 60, 70 years ago, and it's there, but you have to dig and find it. And that's what Nelson did for every day of his life for the last 35 years he was alive. He'd go to the library and look stuff up just constantly, and he built the record book. It was a hobby in 1979, and I was a journalism student, so I thought we could marry the two, his research and my, being a journalist with and have a business, a newsletter. It was a newsletter initially, just a subscription newsletter. Then we got into doing rankings, and the rankings got a lot of attention. Then when USA Today started, I think about 81, when USA Today started, they had like a state-by-state report a couple of times a week, and I did the California stuff for them, and they ran our state rankings, and that kind of really helped us take off at the time, So it kind of built from there into a newsletter, and then a magazine, and then we got a partner in 1989, Andy Bark, who we started with CalHi Sports Magazine, became Student Sports Magazine, and on, and then we got to ESPN. And, long story short, the ESPN thing ended in 2012, so I kind of had to start all over again. But I had a very fair severance, and I was able to start all over again quite easily with a website of our own and starting different projects. And the book was one of those projects, and it's continued to go on, and I'm happy about it. So.
In the foreword, you have Eric Sonheimer from LA Times writing about how the publisher came to him, and he was like, dude, I'm a Southern California guy. The guy you need to talk to is Mark Tennis. Tell us about how that conversation came up and how the idea and the fruition of this book came to be.
The book is from Skyhorse Publishing out of New York, and Skyhorse had this, I guess, executive editor or someone up the chain had the idea that it would be really cool to have a series of high school football books around the country. Yeah. And they, of course, picked California, being the biggest state by far. Texas is an obvious one. And they picked, they want to do one for Pennsylvania, I believe, and Ohio.
Probably Florida.
And maybe Florida, and Florida is another one. And the Texas one just came out a couple weeks ago, a week and a half ago. The Texas one just came out. And it's got a similar, I in fact wrote their intro. They just put the different words in. It's kind of funny. That's my intro, but they just put the different Texas in with California.
Yeah.
But it's fine. And so it kind of came from there. And, that was their idea to have it. But when they contacted me to write it, they gave me a year to do the project. And it was 50,000 words. They wanted it to be a chapter book. How I took it from there was entirely up to me. At first, I thought they wanted a book in which it was mostly first person by the people I was interviewing. But in continuing to discuss things, they wanted it probably more free-flowing. So I kind of had an idea of one person sort of being the star or the featured person in each chapter. And then each chapter sort of became a topic of itself. So it's a story about somebody, but it's also a story about a chapter.
Right.
There's a great guy I met in Stockton about the Salute to Service chapter, and he sort of is the star of that. But that's also the chapter where Pat Tillman is in. That's also the chapter where there was a gentleman from Orange County who was at San Diego State who gave up his career and was killed in action. So the point is, in that chapter, is there's a lot of people that served in the military that were high school stars that we never heard of because they gave their life in service of their country. And then this guy, Jack Farrell, in Stockton sort of became the star of that chapter. And a lot of the chapters sort of have that flow to them, where there's a topic, there's a statewide element to it, and there's a person I've talked to sort of highlight that chapter.
You have a Kern County feel, obviously, in this book. We'll get to the big one in a second, but one was Wasco, a team in 2012, we all remember, went 13-0 and ran roughshed through the Central Section, and then before the state concocted finally all section champions getting an automatic bid into a state playoff, they got left out. BHS once got left out, I think, in 2011 as well. When you were writing that chapter, did you have an idea of what schools that you felt, in that time period between 2008 and 2014?
Yeah.
13? Did you?
This is the third year of the.
Yeah, so that would be 2015 was the last one and the old one. Did you ever feel like there were specific teams in specific years that really got left out when they shouldn't have?
I kind of knew that, that this is a chapter on how the state playoffs evolved to where they are today, from not having them at all until 2006, then we had bowl games in 2006. And I kind of had an idea of certain elements that led into getting to where they are now, which is everybody that wins a section championship gets to go on, and no one gets kind of left off in a committee or a boardroom. And I was part of the boardroom, process at the beginning. I would give suggestions on team. I didn't think Wasco was going to get picked that year. I thought San Diego Madison was going to get picked, and they did get picked. Yep. They had a tougher schedule, of course, they did. Now, it still was bad for It didn't mean anybody in the room didn't feel bad for Wasco. They did.
Yeah.
And there was a strong reaction to that. And I knew in talking to Pete Sacco, Pete Sacco is from the CIF Sac Joaquin section. And if there's anybody who is sort of the innovator, originator of the state playoffs in football or state bowl games in football, it's him.
Oh yeah,
from the Sac Joaquin section, and Pete sort of pushed it. Pete knew how the CIF works and knew how something could get passed, and he crafted a proposal so it got passed initially, and then they've tweaked it since then. And one of those major tweaks was letting every section championship in. And he also brought up the Wasco situation in 2012 because, and this is a credit to the people of that community because they were so angry, they were so mad.
They marched they literally marched to the state capitol in Sacramento.
They made a force of themselves, and they in effect helped change the system so that another school later on down the line, like a Strathmore last year or someone like that, actually has a chance to win a state title.
Yeah.
So it kind of forced the CIF a little bit to think about what they wanted to do with the football games. And, there's still problems with it, but everybody that wins a section title gets to go on. There's no one that's left out. And there were a lot of teams annually getting left out, and for obvious reasons. It's the same reasons we have now. We know De La Salle is going to be in there. We know the Bosco Mater Dei winner's automatic and blah, blah, blah. But now everyone gets a chance. And as the state has evolved, I think it's sort of there's a two-tier system going here. We've got this little sandbox with these monster programs.
I mean, when you say a little sandbox, you're literally talking about five schools.
Well, you have the Southern Section Division I teams, which is 18 teams, and we all know that 15 or 16 of those have no chance of beating St. John Bosco or Mater Dei. None at all. None. There's no way. And so
we saw Bosco here in town against Garza 3 weeks ago.
Way.
You walk off the bus and you go, that team can beat a lower
college.
end. Yeah, they can beat a lower end college team.
That's how it is down there now. The transfers have changed it all. Not that Bosco's all transfers. They transformed their program on their own as well. I give them credit for that. They definitely did. But the small sandbox is the open division. It's the Southern Section Division I teams, of which 15 of them don't have a chance. So it's the Mater Dei Bosco winner, and they're going to probably play De La Salle every year.
Well, especially we know now because De La Salle blanked Folsom in the first week.
Yes.
So that chance for Folsom to finally get the open division bid in NorCal goes out the window on August 17th.
Yes, that's gone. But there's never a chance. They're playing Buchanan tomorrow. It's on the road. Maybe De La Salle's not looking to that game at all. They just beat Bishop Gorman. And maybe they're going to be flat and not thinking about Buchanan. You never know. I mean, probably not. Buchanan's probably not going to come very close, but you never know. And that could open the door for a Central down the road playing Buchanan the following week. There's at least that scenarios out there. But the bottom line is this small little sandbox with the open division teams is almost always going to be De La Salle versus St. John Bosco or Mater Dei or Corona Centennial, maybe.
Right.
And maybe Oaks Christian. I don't know. I don't know. Oaks Christian.
Another team that we're going to get to in a bit that's here in town.
They're very good. They might be the fourth best team in the state, but they're all in the same Southern Section division, so only one of them is going to get out of it.
Right.
Bottom line, that's one sandbox. Then you've got the other sandbox with everybody else, and you're not sure who's going to be D1AA, D1A, D2A. You don't know where they're going to go. The Central Section can have teams going north, going south.
Yep.
And that's where the best stories can emerge.
And we've seen it before. The same year that Ridgeview played Narbonne was the same year that Liberty had hosted, I think, Del Oro that same year, or BHS went up and played Del Oro. And who else did we have? We had somebody going in the southern section of the valley. Oh, no, it was BCHS and Selma playing against each other. Yeah. So Zach and I made that trip, went to Selma, saw BCHS win on that final field goal block, and they returned it for a touchdown, and then we went up and watched Del Oro just manhandle BHS that year. So,
but that's great stuff because you don't know what's going to happen. It's not preordained. There's no team going to slaughter everybody. Right. Most likely, Strathmore was a great story last year. How they came back and beat Hillmar, that incredible game, and then they win state, avenge their loss to St. Pat, St. Vincent. There's some great stories in those lower divisions.
Which was the last one that they lost in the state playoffs the year before. Strathmore, a team that's now won 20 in a row, and you said they're tied with Mater Dei for the state.
Yes, they are.
On field, on field, obviously, because Mater Dei
has a forfeit loss, but we count Mater Dei with a 20-game winning streak, and Strathmore has a 20-game. So that's kind of cool to be tied with maybe the number one team in the nation for the longest winning streak.
Yeah, not bad.
And they might lose tomorrow. They're playing IMG Academy, which is another.
You've got to have your eye on that game.
Yeah, it's important, but from the California standpoint, it doesn't mean anything.
Yeah,
it really does. The national is huge.
Yeah,
it's probably the national championship game to a large degree.
Right.
If Mater Dei wins,
September.
then the Mater Dei Bosco game is the national championship game, and then they'll probably play a second time, and then that'll be the national championship game, and then the winner
they'll play
of that
in league, and then they'll probably play for the Southern Section Open Division title.
It might not be the title, but we're not sure how that forfeit's going to come into play. Whether Mater Dei has a forfeit loss, they might not be seeded first. Maybe Centennial.
That's ridiculous.
But they might do that.
Yeah, they might get the third seed. And
if you have a forfeit loss, you're going to count it as a forfeit or not.
Exactly.
That's the interesting part of the Mater Dei situation is the forfeit. If Bosco wins, it doesn't matter, But we'll see. It'll be interesting. But the point is that you have this small sandbox on one side with the big giant super prep schools and De La Salle, and everybody else is in the other sandbox, and that's where you don't know who's going to play who. You kind of can look at the teams, and teams are going to evolve, and the best stories are going to come out of there. Some team that never won before, like Galileo of San Francisco last year. That was great that they won. Yeah, it was the lowest division. They still won. It was still great. They had to go way down to Calexico to win, and they won. I mean, what a great story. I mean, that's a great story, and that's what you're looking for and what we do for a living are great stories.
Yeah.
We don't care where they come from.
Well, no, and that's the best thing about it, too, is you get it like Kennedy went to the state playoffs 2 years in a row, and that was a team that, lost 30 games in a row to start the program.
Exactly, yeah.
And, when they're able to turn it around, they don't care what division they're playing, and they know that they're playing for a chance for a state championship.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, unless you're Mater Dei or Bosco or De La Salle, whether or not you're in the Open or not, really does revolve around a handful of teams, and that's about it.
And everybody else is in the other sandbox, and you don't know exactly where they're going to play. There's a lot of speculation. That's where the fun is. To me, that's where all the fun is. And we cover the big schools, of course, and we rank them, and now their players or their guys are going to get All-State and All-Americans, and one of them probably be Mr. Football, and that's, the coaches are great, but it's a different level that they're shooting for that 95% of the other schools in California they're not interested in. they don't have to worry about it because they're never going to play.
They just don't know.
It's a world you don't know, and that doesn't matter. There's still a lot of great stories, and that's we'll keep looking for those, and I'm sure there'll be a bunch more to emerge.
First story that you had, the first chapter of your book was talking about the legacy of the best programs in the state of California, and you said Bakersfield High, obviously with the most state championships, rivals with Long Beach Poly as the two best. Why was that the first chapter, and why do you feel so strongly about what the Drillers did, not only recently with the 2013 D1 state title, but obviously winning those first 7 before the state abolished the state championship in 1928.
1927, yeah. Well, I wanted to put a lot of the historical stories at the beginning of the book. So I knew there'd be a chapter about guys that set state records. I knew there'd be a chapter about some of the best teams that we've had in California all time. And I knew there'd be a chapter about the schools, the schools that have been dominant for many, many, many years. And in California, everyone knows about LaSalle, but they've only really been good since about 1980.
Right.
And everyone knows about even Mater Dei and Bosco. They're all recent teams that have emerged. And I wanted to focus on the two schools that have been great for really 100 years. And that's BHS and that's Long Beach Poly. And they, of course, played each other not that long ago.
Yep.
And I did go to that game because I had to, But those two stand out because they've been so good for so long. And their win totals are the top 2 schools in the state for all-time wins. The Long Beach Poly people will argue that the 12 wins we count for rugby shouldn't count, but we count it. So because in those years rugby was a substitute for football. So you can argue about some of the win totals, but those are clearly the top 2 based on all-time wins, championships, many other factors. Long Beach Poly, of course, has this great distinction where they've produced the most players to the NFL.
They still have like 12 guys in the NFL right now, I think.
Right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, even last,
Well, I think that's the whole Warren League. Is that what's the league?
The Moore League.
Yeah, the Moore League.
Moore
I think
League.
Warren is one of the high schools. But I think that, Mike G was saying that is, it's the league with the most players in the NFL currently than any high school league in America.
Yeah, that's true, but that's mostly poly guys. There's a few non-poly guys. John Ross is a second-year guy who was a first-round pick, went to Washington. He's not from poly, but most of them are from Long Beach Poly. Deshaun Jackson got a touchdown catch last week. Mercedes Lewis is still in the league, a great tight end. And Juju Smith-Schuster, he scored a touchdown last week, so they both caught, and then Kalen Clay plays for the Giants, and I'm thinking, well, it'd be great if he caught one too. They have 3 poly guys catch touchdown passes in the same day.
That'd be pretty incredible when you think about we get excited when Cody Kessler has a chance to maybe get a few snaps in for Jacksonville, or we're excited to see what Derek Carr can do. But we're talking about different players from Kern County. You're talking about one high school.
One high school, Long Beach Poly. I think it's about 60 players from that school have been in the NFL. Something about 60.
And one of them, Willie McGinnis, is a guy that I have in the lead for my story for tomorrow, because we can get into this one really quickly now too. Is Oaks Christian, like you said, you haven't ranked 5th in the state. They're at Bakersfield Christian tomorrow night. That game is on ESPNU live at 7 p.m. So not only do you get a nationally ranked team, a state-ranked team like Oaks Christian in town, not only do you get a guy like Kavion Thibodeau, who is the number 1 recruited senior in the United States coming into town as a defensive end for the Lions, you've got ESPN coming in, and we've never had ESPN in Bakersfield before. We've had hoopla here before with BHS winning a state title. And then the last time Oaks Christian, Josh, do you remember this game, the last time Oaks Christian was in town in 2008?
Yeah.
And the spectacle when
I know.
Yeah,
I think it was Will Smith flew in on a helicopter and landed it in the church parking lot next door. And he came over, and Wayne Gretzky was there because his kid was playing, and then Nate Montana, the son of Joe Montana, was there. So Joe Montana was there.
Nick,
Nick. No. So I
covered that team, and that was a game we thought might be on ESPN. But the
Because
game
it was Derek's senior year.
But
his only year here.
but then the year I was with ESPN at the time, what they ended up doing is Oaks Christian, when they played up in Washington the next year when those guys were seniors, and they had Montana, Gretzky, and Will Smith again came in, right on the sidelines, and his son Trey had the best game of his life on that ESPN game up in Washington, and I was there, and it was great to see that he was like any other dad. You know, he was bragging to his wife on the phone. He's all excited. I was like, this is great. This is what I hope you could enjoy, and not just be, the world famous superstar actor, not being able to be a dad like everybody else. And he was that night, and it was great to see. I didn't ask for an interview or anything like that. I wanted to interview his kid because his kid had 10 catches that night. But I wasn't going to do the other stuff. But it was still fun to see him enjoy the experience that one night of his kid catching a touchdown pass and on ESPN.
Do you remember Matt Kimmel who used to work for the Auburn Journal?
I know the name.
He told me a story once where he was working at a movie theater. He grew up in Agora, Calabasas area where Will Smith lives. He said he was working in high school, doing the ticket stubs. And guy walks in with a bag of Johnny Rockets and drinks, and his manager comes over, wipes his nose, and goes, "He can't come here with that food." And he goes, "His poster's right there. I think he can come in with whatever he wants." And it was Will Smith and a couple of the kids walking in, just wanting to watch a movie, and the little snot-nosed manager was like, "He can't bring that in." I'm like, you have a job because of guys like that. Relax.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's good to see. It was good to see that he had a fun time. And, Oaks Christian doesn't have anybody with those kind of connections this year, but Kayvon Thibodeau is one of the top guys for sure, and he is just so destructive.
They got a heck of a running back too that's going to Michigan.
Yeah, Zach Charbonnet or Charbonnet. I don't know all the pronunciations of these guys.
Go check ESPN tomorrow night. I guess.
but he's very good, and they're fourth in the generally considered the fourth best team in the Southern Section Division I. Now last year they were in Division II, and they played Helix in the SoCal D1AA game and lost. And then Helix went up and got destroyed by Folsom. So, and this year, Oaks Christian, unfortunately, instead of staying in Division II, where they might have really been able to win the title, now they're in Division I in the Southern Section, and
they're not going to sniff the state playoffs.
They're not going to beat. They'll be the fourth seed probably, and they'll have to play one of the. Mater Dei or Bosco probably in the semifinals, and that's probably going to be it. I mean, maybe they'll win, but they're going to be big underdogs. Anyone's a big underdog playing those two.
Have you ever, there's always the question mark. Oh, is the 13 teams the right option? Is the 13 games the right option? Should there be like an open and a private and a public? But I think the way the system works right now. But is it really a problem that those teams don't get to play for a state playoff that year, or teams like that?
There's teams. Mission Viejo had a great team last year, and I had a long conversation, and it's part of the book. With
former
Bob
head
Johnson.
coach.
And he basically retired. So we can't compete with those teams. What am I going to tell my kids? You're going to have a chance to win. We have no chance. There's no way. We're it's a different level. They've got all these, literally transfers at every position. Some of these schools, these two schools. We can't compete with that. Are we going to bring in guys from all over? No. De La Salle doesn't even bring in guys from all over, and they can't compete with that either.
Yeah.
So, but I think.
And when you say all over, you're not just talking about Southern California. These kids are coming in from other states.
It's not quite that bad yet. It's mostly all over Southern California.
Okay.
Yeah, the Inland Empire and et cetera places going to.
But that region in itself is as large as almost every state in the union.
Right, of course. No, but it's we'll see what happens. But what was your question when I got on you were asking about?
What did I ask him? I forgot.
I forgot too. Oh well. But
it is. It's about, do they need to restructure it again?
Restructure again.
Or does it really matter?
There are a lot of coaches that do think you should have to restructure. I don't know if it's putting in the second best team in the Southern Section because they're just going to crush everybody too.
Why not just have an open division play-in game so you have two teams moving on?
Yeah, well, the thing
Sorry, go ahead.
No, the thing I always thought is if you had the top two teams in the Southern Section go on and the top two teams in the Northern Section go on, and then you have a double header, and you cross match them.
Yeah.
So one plays 2, and then
so you're not playing the same 2 teams 2 weeks in a row.
Right. Yeah. So you could do that. There was a coach. We did a questionnaire to the coaches. There was a coach at Camp Olindo, Kevin Macy, who's been in the state finals. Both
they beat BCHS right
he's
here in
been
town.
He's been in the old system. He's been at the big. He's been at the StubHub Center and won a title. He's had a 16-0 team. He's really seen everything. He would like to see, and he had a really good idea. He wanted to have he wanted to have all the teams still qualified the way they are, but broken up into a private division, a public division, and then a floater game. It was pretty complicated. It was like, you know what, I could see people really supporting something like this, because it would give a school, potentially a school like a Mission Viejo or Corona Centennial. The Corona Centennial head coach, Matt Logan, wanted to see a system where the 2 Southern Section teams that don't win in their top division have a play-in game, and they get to go on somehow. That was his thought, because those are really, really good teams, and they're not getting a chance to win partly because of competitive equity, the way they're just moving teams up all into the top division in the Southern section.
But it's also not fair to the rest of the state to go, oh, well, we can't get them in the Open, so let's get them into D1.
Right.
But they didn't win. They didn't win the games they were supposed to win.
And it's the same way in other sports. It's the same way with the Southern section and girls volleyball. We know whoever is 5th in the Southern section is going to crush everybody and win Division I in the state. And that's happened every time they've done it. And it'll happen again this year. The 5th best team, the top 4 will go to the Open division of the state. That next team won't, and that's the best team by far. And so I think the way they look at it in the Southern sections, they know they have a lot of advantages in a lot of sports with having their own Open division. And there's some football teams that definitely don't get to play on because of the way they do competitive equity in that section and move teams up into like Oaks Christian last year. If they were coming back with this team in the same division, they'd be right there with Folsom and anybody, and they could win a state title. But now that they got moved up into Division I, probably not so much.
It all stalls probably in the quarterfinals in the Southern section.
No, it's going to be a lot harder. So that's the competitive equity they're doing down there. So you have to look at it from each section standpoint. And most sections are going to do the state, are going to regard their own playoffs, what's best for their own section before what's best for the state. I think most sections do that. And the central section's easy. You know exactly what division everybody's in. You can look at it, who's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, who's favored to win. It's quite easy. Central Coast is a mess. You have this open division format, and a lot of people are mad at them that they're working the system to get some of their top teams into it, and I can see that. You have Milpitas down there in a small division, and they won a state title. And you have, Sarah, St. Francis is in the West Catholic League, but there they were playing Grace Brethren in D2A. And people are like, oh, is this really fair that St. Francis should be in this game? If they were in the Southern section or in the Mission League or the Trinity League, they probably wouldn't win a game. Maybe not,
I want to get into some state playoff scenarios once we get into our predictions, because we got a couple teams that are playing tomorrow night that are on your list. But before we take a break, Mark, what was your do you have one specific chapter or anything you were doing in that year that you were writing this book that really stood out to you and went, wow, that was a magical moment for me?
The magical moment, there were 2 of them, but one of them I kind of mentioned was meeting Jack Farrell, who's the 91-year-old. Now he's 93, but he was featured in the chapter about Salute to Service.
Right.
But the other one was being able to talk to Lucy Wiedemeyer, who is the widow of Charlie Wiedemeyer. And I knew that I wanted to end the book with Charlie's story. He's the coach from Los Gatos in the late 80s, mid-80s, who developed Lou Gehrig's disease, continued to coach the team. At one point, he was calling the plays through his mind. His wife would read his lips and then give the play to the assistant coach, and the assistant coach would then – that's how they did the plays. They did that for a whole year, 2 years.
That's incredible.
It was incredible, and I saw it. It's the most inspirational story I ever covered, still. And I knew I wanted to end the story with Charlie's story, and I didn't know if I'd be able to speak to his wife. But through a contact from Robert Bronstein, who runs the 49ers CalHi Sports Report in the Bay Area, she turns out she's advertising with him So I was able to get a hold of her, and she added so much color to the last chapter about Charlie and his situation. I had spoken to Butch Catolico, who was his assistant coach at the time.
And I know his son Joe quite well.
Joe, right? It's now it's Sheldon in Sacramento.
Used to be Pleasant Grove's head
Used
coach.
to be Pleasant Grove, but you know, when getting her on the phone, it sort of like really crystallized that last chapter, how I wanted to write it, and I knew it was going to be the last chapter I wrote and the last chapter that in the book. And what she told me was the last scene, and I sort of, maybe people should buy the book to read this chapter, but the book ends with that story, and the last scene came from her. So it was quite fun to get to her. That was pretty enjoyable.
Buy this book. It's on Amazon right now, or if you want to get a hard copy of it in person, Saturday, 2 p.m. at the Barnes & Noble on California Avenue. Mark will be there for 2.5 hours signing your copy, whether you bring one in or you buy one there at the Barnes & Noble. If you're a high school football fan of any sort in California, pick this book up. It's an incredible read, written by an incredible man. Mark, thanks for your time. I know you're going to stick around and do our predictions. Josh, we're going to bring you into the fold right after this. We'll be right back here on BVarsity Live.